may be more or less current. So you want to keep that in mind, okay? But this is still a fun thing to look at. And of course, what people like to do is look for us. Americans, by nature, are competitive. I don't see us yet. But now we're into the positive territory where prices are rising. All right, most people would agree, most economists would agree, if you have a little bit of inflation, it's okay. It's a healthy thing. Somewhere between 1% and 5%, pretty healthy. Once you get to double digits, you need to start worrying.
Is that only double digits?
How is, you said San
No, 10% or more. What's that?
San Marino's in Italy, you said? It is.
San Marino, yeah.
It's in Italy.
Yeah, it's known, along with Vatican City, I believe, they're actually recognized as sovereign countries, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. All right, Germany, 1% inflation in 2010. Spain, 1.3. Oh, U.S., 1.4. Very, very moderate. Now, write this down. Historically, our average is right around 4%. Inflation each year. Some years it's lower, some years it's higher. But our historical average over the last several decades in the United States is right around 4%. All right, let's keep going and see what else we see here. Chile, 1.7. These are all pretty reasonable numbers. This is where you start to get concerned. Fortunately, you can kind of see a general trend geographic. What's that?
Turkmenistan.
Turkmenistan?
They're in trouble.
Yeah, they're having some trouble.
Jeez, 13.
See the number of African countries that are starting to populate us?
30%.
Now, 30%, let's just say that. 30%, what does that mean? That means that at the beginning of the year, you were on average or paying a certain price for something, it was 30% higher by the end of the year.
That's insane.
College tuition, oil, food, whatever it was. All right? That's not the highest it gets, though. We have something, write this down, called hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is when you're in the triple digits.
Has the U.S. ever been in double digits?
We have. Not so much the Depression as the 1970s. I'll come back to that later. Right? But that's what that means. 30% means, on average, now some things aren't going to be rising as fast as others. Okay? Let me give you an example. So in this country, roughly our average is what year after year? 4%. All right? Now that's an average of all stuff combined, and that's the consumer price index. Right? So we buy a lot of things in this country, right? Some of them are small, like packs of gum. Some of them are big, like cars and college educations. All that stuff gets lumped together, typically. So, what about college education? You know what's interesting is when I was a senior in high school in 1988, that's when I graduated. That year, what it cost in a year of tuition to go to my high school, I went to Bishop Amat High School, was about the same in terms of 1 year of tuition as UCLA. So I was like, all right, I can do this. My parents, more specifically, they can do this. It was $1,000 a year. That's what it cost. $1,000 a year to go to my high school, just tuition. And it cost $1,000 a year the first year at UCLA, tuition. Well, today it's pretty much the same thing. 1 year, about the same, right? 1 year at Chaminade is probably a little more expensive, I think, now. Just tuition.
1 year at Chaminade is
Isn't it like 13?
my brother goes to state school, and our tuition is like a couple grand, like 10,000 a year for him. And we're like 12.
But what about UCLA? Your sister goes, what does she
It's
say?
like 12 and theirs is like 13.
Yeah, so it's almost the same, right? They've gone up at the same pace. But does it sound, just by listening, that it's been about 4% a year? For that item? No. They've gone up much faster, I would say, than 4% a year. All right? And if you want to check it out for sure, it's one of these external links that you have. We'll go back and look at an inflation calculator. Let's see. You want to see what inflation, growth, and unemployment is right now? Here's the link right now for the United States. What you have to do is it goes month by month, but if you scroll down, you can see it real easy. All right? Right now, we're at an annual rate of 1.39%. That's our inflation rate currently. Okay? As of the close of business Friday. They recalculate this every day based on recent information, and they project for a year. GDP growth. All right? When they say we need to grow our economy, they're usually, they being economists, politicians, they're usually referring to GDP. That's chapter 6. All right? We're projected at a little over 3% growth of GDP in the next year. Unemployment, 9%. 9% unemployment in the United States. Not good, right? Although we had the biggest monthly decline in the unemployment rate this last month than we've had in several years. It was 9.6, 9.8, it was up to 10% in the last year, all right? So, at least we're down to 9. And I hate to say this, but I'm so glad I'm not you. When it comes to the job market, seriously, it's a tough job market out there. I'm glad I have a job. I don't take it for granted anymore either, by the way. Up until a couple years ago, I used to go, okay, as long as I don't, slap somebody in class and completely screw up my job, I know I'm going to have a job for as long as I want it. But I don't know. I just don't feel that way anymore. No one's come to me and said, oh, by the way, you better be on your toes because of the economy. But it's just like a psychological thing for me where I go, I just don't take having a job for granted anymore, no matter what the job is, because of the economic climate. All right, so write these 3 numbers down. This is what they are for today. And I would consider this a current event that could be a part of a future quiz. So our inflation rate right now is 1.39%, our GDP growth 3.14%, and the unemployment rate currently is 9%. Can I close this? 4, 3, it's just how my kids acting home. Like, get out of the base. Get out of the bath, Christian. But I want to play. Get out of the bath. No. 5, 4. They just jump out like they have springs in their legs. Nothing ever happens. Don't tell them. Nothing ever happens when I get to 0. But they can't stand to let me get to 0. All right. 0. Now.
No, Mr. Grady.
What?
What would be a healthy GDP?
That's debatable, but most people would like to see between 5 and 10% growth. Most economists would say 5 to 10% growth, but you have to balance these things with each other. And if you have that kind of growth and prices are spiraling upward out of control, then that's not the best thing for most of society. But we're going to get to that later when we start talking about theorists.
And then has the GDP increased over the years?
Oh yeah, there's a chart. It's one of your external links. We can get back to that in a minute. But let's stick with inflation for a second. So prices. Let's go a little bit deeper into prices. The price folder has the current CPI and historical charts. Right? So if you want to go back several years and you want to look at, or you want to debate with each other, oh, the prices are really high during the Great Depression. Well, let's take a look. This is the CPI, which is what you have to know how to calculate in this class. More simplified version. And it's like the stock market index. And somebody saying, did you hear the stock market's up today? The Dow is up over 12,000 points. Okay, there's a way that they calculate that. You don't have to do that for this class. But when they say the CPI is over 216, you need to know how to come up with that figure. And that's what they use to track prices historically. Okay, going back to 1999, when the CPI in January was 164, and you can go back even further, year by year, for several decades.
Do we use the formula from the book?
Yes, that's what you're going to do. But before I get to that, let's have a little fun with the inflation calculator. All right. So let's say that I'm trying to save up for my kids' college education, and right now they're being thoroughly brainwashed to want to go to UCLA. Part of it's because my wife and I met at UCLA. Another reason is because when they go, chances are, based on the recent past, I'm thinking that it'll be within our budget as long as it increases at the same pace Chaminade. will increase, because we're gonna have to pay tuition for Chaminade, right? So let's say that Chaminade's tuition is $13,000, right? And we can't go to the future with this. There's another calculator we could use. But let's say, we were starting off in 1988, and then we went to a future year. You click submit, close to 20 years later, and you would see actually how much money you would need based on what happened with inflation over that period of time, right? Or you could go to just 1,000, start with 1,000, and do a realistic example, right? 1988 to 2009, let's say I was going to go to college now. I wouldn't need $1,000, I need 1,790. Okay? If college was going up at the national average. Did college go up at the national average? Heck no. Way more than that. But just for the sake of argument, let's say it was 13,000. Once that principal or base amount becomes bigger, everything, the impact becomes bigger. So let's say for about 20 years, based on historical numbers, all right, once upon a time it cost me $13,000 to go to college, and now, 20 years later, I have to pay for my kids going to college at the same place. Instead of $13,000, I need $23,273 and change, right? Now, if you go, well, you know what, Mr. Gideon, I don't care about the past. I'm a future person. Then fine, let's go to the future calculator. Close this, future value. And there's brief explanations here, right? Inflation calculator, fun to play with, scary to think about. Future value calculator helps you estimate the future impact of inflation and realistically plan to meet your financial goals. So, some of you I know have big financial goals. Look around the room, think of Victor. He's going to be a high roller someday. All right, Amir, definitely. All right, Matt, Nicole. So some of you people have to ask yourself, realistically, what do I have to put away? Is $1 million going to be $1 million or not? So you go to the future value calculator, and you say, all right, let's say right now, what's it going to take you to live the lifestyle that you want on an annual basis?
A year, oh yeah.
Let's just talk about the house. If you had the money today, which you don't, I think most of you don't, you're going to live in the house that you want, how much would it cost? How much would it cost? How much? $100 million? You did not say $100 million house. 2.5 million? That's nice. That's not completely outlandish. 2.5 million? All right, let's put 2.5 million. All right, and let's say number of time periods, how old until you expect to be able to afford that $2.5 million house?
1 year.
Seriously? Come on now.
Let's say like 15 years.
15 years, fine. So 15 years at an interest rate or an inflation rate of 4% a year. You're going to need more than 2.5 mil. You're going to need 4.5 mil. If the price of that thing or inflation is roughly 4% on average annual basis. Now, right now inflation isn't that much, but some people are really worried. They're worried that the banking system, headed up by the Federal Reserve and Ben Bernanke, is going to be really increasing inflation through some of their monetary policy actions. Some people are going, oh my gosh, it's not happening right away, but in the next couple of years, we're going to be somewhere around here. Thanks to what they're doing. Fight the Fed so this doesn't happen. Because if I want my $2.5 million house, it's not going to cost me in 15 years 2.5 mil. It's going to cost me at 10%, 10 mil. All right? So inflation matters, obviously. You can always play with these and share these with people if you want. But now let's get to the calculations. So chapter 5, how do you calculate the CPI and how do you do some other things with that CPI? A couple pages in. For me, it's on page 116, but I think most of you guys have a later version. Just go to computing